Okay, so I have 4 articles for you tonight. So I'm just gonna get right into it. The first one is transgender pronoun policy didn't violate teachers' religious rights court rules. And this is from a publication called Straight Arrow News. And that's why I picked this one because I just love the name of the publication. Anyway, a federal appeals court ruled that a Maryland public school system did not violate a substitute teacher's First Amendment rights after requiring the teacher to use a transgender student's preferred pronouns in class. Right, because there's literally nothing in the Bible that says anything about pronouns. In a 2-1 decision released Wednesday, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit agreed that with a lower court's ruling dismissing most of Kimberly Polk's lawsuit claiming Montgomery County Public Schools violated her free speech and religious rights. The court's decision could impact other cases similar to Polk's, given the Fourth Circuit's ruling covers Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and West Virginia. Polk's lawsuit also alleged that the school further violated her rights by refusing to provide a religious accommodation to the policy. The court also rejected this argument. In his majority opinion, Judge Robert B. King said Polk had not proved to the court the school's policy requiring teachers to use a student's preferred pronouns was hostile towards her religion. King wrote that the school did not violate her free speech protections because following the policy was part of her official duties. Exactly. I mean, usually people want to know what the rules of a workplace are before they, take a job. So if she knew that this was the policy, she could have just said, I'll find a job elsewhere if it really, really irked her. But it's certainly, that is something that annoys me with a lot of Christians. This idea that they somehow think that because they have a certain religious belief or claim that anything that they believe is a religious belief, that means that people should just bow down and accept it. When not everything that you believe has anything to do with religion, like using someone's preferred pronouns. I mean, I'm sure that she doesn't have a problem calling Roberta Bobby. Most people would consider Bobby to be a male name, but Bobby is also an acceptable nickname for women. So, named Roberta. So, yeah, I failed to see the difference. And it sure as hell has nothing to do with religion. How a teacher addresses a particular student in a particular classroom and whether a teacher communicates with a student's parent is merely a part of that teacher's job description, you wrote. Yes, but we live in an age where people think that if they have a belief and they wrap it in religion, even whether it's religious or not, that they can do whatever the fuck they want. And that's just not the way it works. If you want to work at a certain place, certain expectations have to be met. And if you can't meet those expectations, find another job. King went on to say that Polk's position was voluntary and that no one forced her to take the job. Precisely. No one forced Polk to become a substitute teacher in Montgomery County, he wrote. Accepting her position as an elementary school substitute teacher subjected Polk to a substantial degree of control by the democratically elected board, including that she adhered to the guidelines. Writing for the dissent, Judge J. Harvey Wilkinson III wrote that the school's policy forced teachers' speech and limited individuals from expressing any opposing viewpoints regarding transgender rights. He said that was a dangerous precipice. Think about it. People not tolerating a certain group of people just for existing is somehow intolerant and dangerous. No. You are free to consider trans people not people. Just you can't do it at your job, because the job is to teach students, not push your understanding of religion on them. By all means, voice objections to Ms. Polk's point of view. Say she is insensitive to issues of transgender identity. That's putting things mildly. But do not indulge affronts to speakers' dignity simply because they, like Ms. Polk, stand in the minority. I'm sorry, what? We're what? She's, her dignity is being questioned because she's being asked to follow the rules? I'm sorry, do you realize you're trying to claim a slippery slope here? But how slippery of a slope is it that someone who doesn't like a certain rule for whatever reason can just ignore it? I mean, rules exist for a reason. In this case, think about it. He's claiming that this is an affront to a speaker's dignity. But at the same time, does not give a rat's ass about the trans person's dignity. I'm sorry, no. That's not how this works. You either follow the rules or you don't. In this case, the rules are that trans people should be treated like human beings who can decide for themselves who they are, and it's not for the teacher to tell them what's what. Maybe this student is going through a phase. Maybe the student is truly trans. It's not for anybody else but the student to make that decision. It's really not that hard. I mean, how is it undignified to respect a person's pronouns? It's not. It doesn't affect your dignity. Okay, you don't think trans people should exist. Fine. Then work at a job where you do not have to acknowledge trans people or deal with trans people. I do not care. But don't claim that somehow you're above the rules because you claim your religion has something to do with it. Which, again, nothing in the Bible says anything about pronouns, or trans people for that matter. So, there is that. Alright. Polk first filed her lawsuit in 2024, according to the Washington Post. She had requested a judge issue a preliminary injunction requiring the school district to temporarily allow her to teach only in elementary schools with no transgender students, as the case went through the courts. To be honest, that is a good start. Unfortunately, elementary school students can already know whether they're trans or not. This is not something where people only figure out they're trans after they go through puberty. That's why puberty blockers exist. So, if you could find a school where there are no trans kids, okay, but how can you be so sure there never will be? Just because you're in elementary school does not mean you can't be trans. Otherwise, it would, be a reasonable idea. The Montgomery County District Court previously denied the injunction and dismissed most of Polk's claims. The court stated that when the school board hired her as a substitute teacher, it paid her to speak on its behalf as her employer. However, the court allowed Polk's claim of a statutory civil rights violation, ruling the case could proceed with legal discovery. Polk decided not to accept the lower court's ruling and instead appealed to the U.S. District Judge Deborah L. Boardman, according to the Post. In response to Wednesday's decision, Polk's attorney Rick Claybrook said they are considering requesting the Supreme Court or the full Fourth Circuit review the decision. Liliana Lopez, a spokesperson for Montgomery County Public Schools, stated that the school board is pleased with the decision. However, she would not provide the further comment due to the possibility of additional litigation. And that is the end of that article. All right. Now, let's move on to Trump and him, hopefully saying the quiet part out loud so people know to be outraged before he does anything to screw up our democracy even more than he has. All right. This is from the New York Times. Trump, in an escalation, calls for Republicans to nationalize elections. I don't think I have to tell you how badly that's going to go. Because let's face it, he wants the Republicans to run the elections. Not just, nationalize the elections and have an independent body run all the states. No. All right. President Trump called in a new interview for the Republican Party to nationalize voting in the United States, an aggressive rhetorical step that was likely to raise new worries about his administration's efforts to involve itself in election matters. During an extended monologue about immigration on a podcast released on Monday by Dan Bongino, his former deputy FBI director, Mr. Trump called for Republican officials to take over voting procedures in 15 states, though he did not name them. I'm pretty sure that those are all Democratic states, is my guess. Because, we want to ensure that not only do Republicans only win from here on out, we don't want Democrats to win anything ever. Because, what could possibly be wrong with that? The Republicans should say, we want to take over, he said. We should take over the voting. The voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting. And if it sounds like I'm talking weird, it is quoting Trump, so. Under the Constitution, American elections are governed primarily by state law, leading to a decentralized process in which voting is administered by county and municipal officials in thousands of precincts across the country. Mr. Trump, however, has long been fixated on the false claims that U.S. elections are rife with fraud and that Democrats are perpetuating a vast conspiracy to have undocumented immigrants vote and lift the party's turnout. Mr. Trump's remarkable call for a political party to seize the mechanism of voting follows a string of moves from his administration to try to exert more control over American elections, as he and his allies continue to make false claims about his 2020 defeat. Probably like the FBI raiding Fulton County's election rolls. Last week, FBI agents seized ballots and other voting records from the 2020 election from an election center in Fulton County, Georgia, where his allies have for years pursued false claims of election fraud. The New York Times reported on Monday that Mr. Trump had spoken on the phone to the FBI agents involved in the Fulton County raid, praising and thanking them. Now, I shouldn't have to tell you how messed up that is, because that's basically saying that the FBI works for Trump, which isn't the way it should work. The FBI, the Department of Justice, none of them should be working for Trump. They are independent agents whereby they, follow the rule of law. Obviously, that's not a thing anymore. The Justice Department, which has been newly politicized under Mr. Trump, is demanding that numerous states, including Minnesota, turn over their full voter rolls as the Trump administration tries to build a national voter file. Because what could possibly go wrong with that? In March, Mr. Trump signed an executive order that tried to make significant changes to the electoral process, including requiring documentary proof of citizenship and demanding that all mail ballots be received by the time polls close on Election Day. But that effort has largely been rebuffed by courts. On social media, Mr. Trump has pushed for even more drastic changes. In August, he wrote that he wanted to end the use of mail-in ballots and potentially the use of voting machines. Right, because, the mail-in ballots, obviously, he claims that that's rife with fraud, which makes you wonder, okay, why are you disenfranchising veterans? I shouldn't say veterans, but the military. Because if you live overseas, whether it's because you're in the military or you have an international job, you're basically being told, sorry, can't vote. So that's one problem. And the use of voting machines. So basically hand counting is what he wants. Now, this is a man who lost his mind that it took, a week or something to fully settle who won an election, because, mail-in ballots. But that took weeks to settle all the races. Now, if we get rid of voting machines, that's one of the reasons he wants to get rid of mail-in ballots, is to quicken the process. But if you get rid of voting machines, it just slows the process down again. So it's not doing what he wants. So what? We're only going to count the ballots people can count in one day? I wouldn't put it past him for thinking that that's how it should work. But that's just messed up. The president's claims of election fraud have been debunked over and over by both independent reviews and Republican officials. A review of the 2024 election by the Trump administration that began last year had found little evidence of widespread voting fraud by non-citizens as of last month, the Times reported. Yes, but Trump never let facts get in his way before. Mr. Trump's escalating remarks about elections come at a moment when Democrats have outperformed the GOP in a series of contests. New Jersey and Virginia elected Democratic governors in landslides in November, and on Saturday, a Democrat won a special election for a Texas state Senate seat by 14 percentage points in a district Mr. Trump had carried by 17 points in 2024. An enormous swing. Yeah. Imagine that people are fed up with the GOP because they're allowing thugs to invade our cities and beat the crap and kill people. Sensing that Republicans were vulnerable to the traditional midterm backlash against the party in power, Mr. Trump last year kickstarted an extraordinary effort to gerrymander congressional maps to give his party an edge. The push, which started in Texas but has since expanded to both Democratic and Republican-controlled states, became a central part of the president's midterm strategy. And another reason why people are thinking that the Democrat won in Texas, because people were seeing what the Republicans were doing and realized that it was illegal and corrupt as fuck. Mr. Trump has made little secret of his interest in expanding the federal government's role in administering what is wrong with me? Administering American elections. Last month, he told the Times that he regretted not dispatching the National Guard to seize voting machines after the 2020 election. Yes, he mentioned that after the reporter reminded him that that was a thing. It's like, stop giving him ideas, you dummies. During his interview with Mr. Bongino, Mr. Trump tied his desire for partisan control of voting mechanisms to his administration's agenda to find and deport undocumented immigrants from American cities. Okay. Obviously, because he thinks that undocumented people are voting, which isn't a thing. I mean, maybe some have, but it's usually a misunderstanding at some point, thinking, oh, I'm to the point where I can vote, and it's not that far yet. So it's usually innocent mistakes. Usually the undocumented don't come here for the sole purpose of voting, because all it's going to do is get them kicked out. So, yeah. If Republicans don't get them out, you will never win another election as a Republican, he said, referring to undocumented immigrants. It's crazy how you can get these people to vote. If we don't get them out, look, Republicans will never win another election. Yeah, it's not because of the undocumented that you might never win another election. And just think about it for a moment. The fact that he's claiming that, I mean, first off, like I said, very few undocumented do vote, and a lot of it is an oopsie. However, he can just kick people off the rolls and claim that he's doing it because they're undocumented, and people will just be like, oh, okay. So he's trying to kick off the voting rolls people who will never vote for a Republican. And this has nothing to do with immigration. I mean, he might think it does, but at the end of the day, that's not what this is about. He just wants to not make sure that Republicans will continue to win because people who shouldn't be voting don't vote. He doesn't want any Democrats to ever win again. Because every accusation is a confession with these people. He does not want Democrats to ever win again. And in order to do that, the Republicans have to play dirty. They have to rig the election so Democrats don't win, because instead of doing things that are popular, they just want to make sure that, only Republicans win. There is no evidence that a significant number of non-citizens have voted in any American election. A 2024 audit by Georgia's Secretary of State found that just 20 of the 8.2 million people registered to vote in Georgia were not citizens, and only 9 had ever voted. So, it sounds like some people registered, realized, oopsies, we're not eligible to vote yet. Or they were just, getting ready for when they could. That's a possibility too. But, okay, 20. That's not going to sway any election. So, yeah. And those are just those who were registered. Only 9 voted. So that's even less of an effect on an election than the 20. So obviously that is not the problem. And there are so many people who've bought into the lie, bought into the bullshit, that is indeed the case. Okay, so that is the end of that article. All right, so here's something I haven't really discussed on this channel. Women returning to Gaza say Israeli troops bound and interrogated them after Rafah crossing. Because we're supposed to have a ceasefire going on because Trump, brought peace to the world. Obviously, that's not happening. All right, this is from, let's see, what publication is this from? The Free Press. All right. Many hoped the reopening of the Rafah crossing between Egypt and Gaza would bring relief to the war-battered territory. But for the first few Palestinians allowed to cross, it proved more harrowing than a homecoming. 3 women who entered Gaza on the first day of the reopening told the Associated Press on Tuesday that Israeli troops blindfolded and handcuffed them, then interrogated and threatened them, holding them for several hours and inflicting what they said was humiliating treatment until they were released. Can we now just stop with this idea that the IDF are in any way the good guys here? Not just the Israeli government, but the IDF, because what the holy hell? The 3 were among 12 Palestinians, mostly women, children, and the elderly, who entered Gaza on Monday through Rafah, which reopened after being closed for most of the Israel-Hamas war. Israeli forces seized the crossing in May 2024. Asked about the reports, the Israeli military said no incidents of inappropriate conduct, mistreatment, apprehensions, or confiscation of property by the Israeli security establishment are known. Yeah, these are the same people who tried to cover up the killing of a journalist. And until it became apparent that they couldn't lie anymore. So, yeah, of course they'll say that. The Shin Bet Intelligence Agency and Kogat, the Israeli military body overseeing humanitarian aid in Gaza, did not immediately respond to questions about the women's allegations. Yeah, I can't imagine why. A humiliation room. The 3 women said the abuse took place at a screening station on the edge of the area of Gaza under Israel military control that all returnees were required to pass through after crossing Rafah. The 12 returnees were brought by bus through the crossing, then drove until they reached the Israeli military zone, said one of the returnees, Rotana El-Regeb, who was coming back with her mother, Huda Abu Abed. The two had left Gaza in March last year for the mother to get medical treatment abroad. At the screening station, they were ordered out of the bus, and members of an Israeli-backed Palestinian armed group, Abu Shabab, including one woman, searched their bags and bodies, she said. Right. Because, I don't know if you've heard this, but Bibi is actually funding Hamas. Why? Because he actually wants the chaos to continue. He doesn't want peace because he wants to be or have a reason to strong arm Palestinians. He can't strong arm them if they're being reasonable. Israeli officers then called them one by one into a room, she said. She said her mother was called first. When Al-Regeb was called, she said she found her mother, who was in her 50s, kneeling on the floor, blindfolded with her hands handcuffed behind her back. I'm sorry, that sounds like what, ISIS would do to their prisoners. So, basically, this group is a terrorist organization, which Israel is backing. Awesome. Al-Regeb said Israeli soldiers did the same with her and took her to an interrogation room or a humiliation room. They questioned her about Hamas and other things in Gaza, things we didn't know and had no connection to, she said. Right, because as we all know, all Palestinians are Hamas. What are we doing here? And not only is Trump not perfectly okay with this, Biden was okay with this. I saw that there were cables that were recently released where the Biden administration was, giving arms to Israel despite knowing what was going on. And these cables were hidden because they knew that people would hate them even more. So, yeah. They also pressured her to act as an informant for the Israeli military, she said. Oh my God. They threaten that they will detain me and I won't return to my children, said Al-Regeb, who has 4 daughters and a son, living with her husband in a tent in Khan Yunis. There was no beating, but there were insults, threats, and psychological pressure. Abu Abed, her mother, confirmed the account to the AP. The third woman, Saba al-Qara, a 57-year-old woman from Khan Yunis who left for medical treatment in Egypt in December 2023, gave a similar account, describing being handcuffed, blindfolded, and interrogated. They interrogated us and asked us about everything that happened in Gaza, she said. We were outside Gaza and knew nothing. The Israelis humiliated us. I guess all Palestinians have a hive mind? Seriously, if they left years ago to get treatment because, they're treating Gaza like a cesspool, how are they supposed to know anything? What is wrong with people? And these are the same people who, and Holocaust Remembrance Day was just a couple days ago, who will pound their chest about the Holocaust, and then they will treat innocent people like that. I'm sorry. How can you claim that you care about what happened at the Holocaust? You don't want people to forget, remember the victims, blah, 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 and then turn around and do the exact same shit that you are supposedly remembering. Under the terms of Rafah's reopening, a European Union mission and Palestinian officials run the border crossing itself, though the names of those entering are first approved by Israel. Israel then has its screening facility some distance away. The military said authorities at the facility cross-checked the identities of people returning to Gaza with Defense Ministry lists and screened their luggage. Right, because nothing says we trust you, then, yeah, we're going to do our own thing. We're just going to let you think that you have any power here. Israeli authorities banned returnees from bringing in any liquid, including drinking water, according to some of those who crossed back to Gaza on Monday. I'm sorry, what? So basically you're training them for when they get to Gaza and they won't have anything. You're training them a little bit early by not letting them drink? Oh my God. Each passenger was allowed to carry one mobile phone and 2,000 shekels, the equivalent of about $650, if they submitted a declaration 24 hours ahead of their travel. So basically, you're going to ensure that they stay poor and incapable of accessing the outside world. Right, and you wonder why people call Gaza an open-air prison. Other electric and digital devices, as well as cigarettes, are not allowed. Why not cigarettes? Oh, are you afraid that they're going to commit arson with cigarettes? Seriously, what the hell is wrong with you people? According to instructions that were posted on the Palestinian side of the crossing and shared with the AP. Jesus Christ. Israel has said checkpoints both in Gaza and the occupied West Bank are for security. Yeah, that's why the EU is there. You do not have to scare and torture women. Elderly women. I can't believe I'm saying elderly because the older one was in her 50s. And claim that it's for security. That's like Trump saying that they have to finish the ballroom for national security. So, it's just bullshit. But Palestinians and right groups have long claimed that Israel mistreats Palestinians' passage through them and tried to gather information and recruit informants. I mean, what are they supposed to inform you on? Personally, I would say yes, agree to become informants and then, never actually do your job because there's literally nothing to inform on. The women's ordeal came after a long and arduous day for the returnees, with far fewer Palestinians entering than expected and confusion over the rules. Well, I'm sure they heard about the shit that they'd be returning to in Gaza, so they probably figured wherever they are, they're better off. That makes sense. And of course, confusing them with rules, which probably contradict and everything, because, the Israelis don't actually want them to come back. I mean, we heard about Trump's Board of Peace taking over Gaza and turning it into the Riviera. Al-Regeb said 42 Palestinian patients and their relatives were brought to the Egyptian side of Rafah at 6 a.m. and completed their paperwork to cross at around 10 a.m. Monday. They then had to wait until around 6 p.m. for the gate to open for their buses. In the end, only one bus with the 12 people was allowed through, she and El-Kara said. On the Gaza side of the crossing, the European team searched their luggage, loaded with gifts for relatives, and took much of it. Really? Al-Regeb and El-Kara said. El-Regeb said they took mobile phones and food, kids' games, and electronic games. We were only allowed to take the clothes on our backs and one bag per person, she said. Are you kidding me? Nothing screams, we want you people to remain miserable and suffer, than this shit. A person familiar with the situation, speaking on condition of anonymity because they were discussing a diplomatic matter, told the AP that returnees were carrying more luggage than anticipated, requiring additional negotiations. Okay. Negotiations? That is not what they were saying. They took all their shit. That's not negotiations. That's saying, oh yeah, well, we can't allow you to actually have a good life or give your kids a good life, so we're going to just take everything. The military said the luggage entry policy had been published in advance without elaborating. I'm sure that was part of the confusion that why people didn't cross. Anyway, El-Regeb said that after they were released from the Israeli screening facility, UN buses took them to Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, where they finally arrived at 1 a.m. on Tuesday. Thank God that I've returned and found my loved one, she said. I am happy that I am in my nation with my family and with my children. Oh, don't worry, they're going to make sure that you are no longer happy. Hamas on Tuesday blasted Israel over the allegations of abuse against the returnees, calling it fascist behavior and organized terrorism. It called on mediators to take immediate action to stop the practices and ensure travelers' safety and freedom during transit. Rights groups and Palestinian officials warned that abuses during the initial reopening could deter others from attempting to cross in the coming days, undermining confidence in the fragile process. Because again, that is the point. More than 110,000 Palestinians left Gaza in the first months of the war before Rafah was shut, and thousands of patients were evacuated abroad for treatment. Many are expected to seek to return. So far, some 30,000 Palestinians have registered with the Palestinian embassy in Egypt to go back to Gaza, according to an embassy official, speaking on a condition of anonymity because he was not authorized to release the information. But the crossing only gives a symbolic chance at return. Israeli officials have spoken of allowing around 50 Palestinians a day back into Gaza. Oh my God. All right. So, all right. Let us move on. I have one last article for you guys. And this is, now, you wouldn't expect this to come from, well, the last article was, the Free Press is out of Manitoba, Canada. So this is another publication that you wouldn't expect this to come from. And that is out of Montana. I'm not seeing the name of the publication right now. I don't know. Anyway. All right. It's ABC Fox. Serving central and western Montana. Okay, cool. Okay. Eswatini minister slammed for reported threat to expel LGBTQ pupils. Rights groups blasted Eswatini's education minister Tuesday for reportedly threatening to expel LGBTQ pupils from school and demanding the government protect the right of every child to education. The minister's remarks last week have raised fears of stigmatization and bullying in Africa's last absolute monarchy, where same-sex relations are banned and the government is accused of repression. So I'm actually surprised that rights groups are able to actually do this. The Eswatini Observer quoted Education Minister Owen, Nuxamalo, as saying during a tour of schools, "I will not tolerate any issue that come with homosexual relationships in our schools." Nuxamalo said he would personally visit schools where same-sex relations were reported and instruct principals to expel those involved, the local daily said. At a meeting called Tuesday to respond, the Eswatini Sexual and Gender Minorities, or ESGM, group said the comment invites bullying, fuels mental health crisis, and leads to systemic exclusion. And like I said, the fact that, how Eswatini views same-sex relations, I'm surprised that these groups are actually able to do this. The principles of equality we fight for as adults must begin with a safe seat in the classroom for every child, it said in a statement. We had to convene urgently, as we fear there would be misconceptions that fuel stigmatization in schools, Executive Director Mafila Silongonyane told AFP. I know I'm butchering these names. The Kango network of non-government organizations, which was also present, earlier demanded the minister retract the remarks. Amnesty International said last week the ministry must guarantee that no student is expelled or otherwise punished on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, or on the basis of stereotypes and rumors. The landlocked nation of 1.3 million people has been ruled since 1986 by King Eswatini III, who has faced criticism for his extravagant lifestyle and repeated human rights violations. Yes, I think I've heard of him. It has strong ties with Washington, accepting last year at least 15 men under the Trump administration's third country deportation program, with more likely to arrive this year, according to Correctional Service officials. And I wonder how many of them are part of the community. Because, we want to punish people for existing. All right, that is the end of that article. And actually, I think I'm going to do one more. This is something that I actually thought was relegated to the dustbin of history. Apparently not. And this comes from, let's see. This is also a local WKYC. All right. Lawsuit alleges Bureau of Indian Affairs officers executed unarmed Shoshone-Paiute man in Idaho. And for those who know any history, the Bureau of Indian Affairs has been corrupt from pretty much the very beginning. I mean, maybe at the very beginning there were some people who actually gave a shit about Native Americans, but that didn't last long. So I see that the Bureau hasn't changed at all. All right. The family of an unarmed Shoshone-Paiute man who was shot and killed by Bureau of Indian Affairs police in March 2024 after a prolonged chase in southwestern Idaho has filed a federal civil rights lawsuit over his death. The lawsuit accuses two unnamed BIA police officers of chasing Cody Whiterock outside of their jurisdiction before shooting him multiple times in the face, back, and chest. The officers then falsified or withheld evidence to escape accountability, the lawsuit says. The agency has not identified the officers involved and declined to comment for this article, because nothing says transparent and on the up and up than doing that. The two BIA officers essentially executed Cody after an exhausting 80-minute chase through the snow, the lawsuit says. Investigate West reported last year on the killings of White Rock and his cousin, Kirby Paradise, at the hands of BIA police. After a ranch owner called 911 reporting an unwanted person on private non-tribal land on March 2, 2024, two BIA officers found White Rock, a father of two, trying to leave in his car alongside a rural stretch of Idaho Route 51 in Owyhee County, about 15 miles south of Riddle, Idaho. His car became stuck in the ice, and Whitrock ran from the officers. One officer chased him through a snowy sagebrush prairie for the next 80 minutes, according to the law enforcement records. Wait a minute. So he's off the reservation. Apparently he's not allowed to be off the reservation. And they chased him because he got stuck in the snow? And obviously he knew what would happen if the officers approached his car, because he ran. For those who think that he ran proves guilt of some sort. It could also be that he knew he was a dead man if he didn't run. Granted, it didn't help, but still. White Rock's family and lawyer cast doubt on the circumstances of the chase. The officer who chased White Rock said the two got in an altercation that knocked him on his back, and White Rock continued aggressing him and kept reaching for his waistband. The officer said that he then hit White Rock with the muzzle of his rifle, which was slung over his shoulder, a movement virtually impossible from his position on the ground, according to the lawsuit. The officer also said he shot White Rock 4 times at close range in the chest and face. A death certificate said White Rock was also shot twice in the back and found lying face down in the snow. You know, this is really giving me Alex Preddy vibes, minus the running away part. White Rock's family said he was unarmed, no weapons were recovered, and posed no immediate threat. Oh, but he was non-white, so obviously he's fair game, because that's the world we live in now. Or actually, in this case, we always lived in. Curiously, despite the reported length of the pursuit, at its end, White Rock's dead body was located only about 200 yards from the roadway, the lawsuit says. The lawsuit is seeking an injunction against further alleged Fourth Amendment violations by the BIA against tribal citizens, and states that at no point did the pursuit and eventual killing of White Rock cross onto tribal land. The BIA is a small federal agency that is responsible for the fulfillment of some of the United States government's treaty obligations to federally recognized tribes, which can include law enforcement, meaning BIA officers patrol a reservation rather than tribal or state police. The BIA provides direct policing services to roughly 200 tribal communities, including the Duck Valley Indian Reservation, where White Rock lived. The suit is filed against 3 Bureau of Indian Affairs police officers, the 2 unknown officers involved in the killing of White Rock, as well as their supervisor. Investigate West's reporting found that the agency did not report the deaths of White Rock and Paradise to the U.S. Department of Justice, as required under the Death in Custody Reporting Act, a federal law meant to track in-custody deaths. The law requires states and federal agencies to report the number of deaths that occur in their custody, including arrest-related deaths, to the federal government. You know, to be honest, in this case, I don't think the federal government would give a shit. So there is that. Deaths at the hands of BIA police are rarely reported publicly, particularly if they occur on tribal land. A lack of media attention means many killings of Native Americans by the BIA and other police agencies go unacknowledged publicly. The lawsuit claims that BIA police lacked legal authority to pursue White Rock outside the boundaries of the Duck Valley Indian Reservation, noting the agency has no memorandum of understanding with local law enforcement in Idaho. Since the BIA lacked jurisdiction, any use of force against White Rock was unreasonable and unlawful. It's the first time in my career where I've had a case where the officers may not have had any jurisdiction at all, Idaho-based attorney T. Jason Wood, who is representing White Rock's family, said in an interview. The lawsuit said that the BIA officers patrolling the Duck Valley Reservation lacked training regarding jurisdictional limits. That's being really generous, actually. Maybe they lacked the training, or they just didn't give a shit. That's also a possibility. Critics have argued that the agency operates without sufficient oversight, with a 2021 internal audit showing serious issues with how the agency tracks and treats in-custody deaths, particularly at the jail facilities it oversees. The agency recently settled a civil rights lawsuit over the separate killing by one of its officers. The lawsuit claimed that Arlen Bordeaux, a Northern Cheyenne man and father of two, was killed by a BIA police officer after the officer tased, pepper sprayed, and beat him with a baton, and shot him 3 times in the back in Lame Deer on the North Cheyenne Indian Reservation, which shares geography with Montana. Federal authorities declined to prosecute the officers who caused his death. One of those officers, Muriel Dila, was charged in October with sexually assaulting a Northern Cheyenne child and eventually banned from the reservation by the Northern Cheyenne tribal government. Oh my God. This is getting more and more disgusting by the sentence. They killed my son like a dog, said Kenneth Bordeaux, the man's father, a former police officer on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Wood says the agency refuses to release a report on White Rock's autopsy. He added that Investigate West's reporting was critical to his ability to file the complaint. The FBI has declined to investigate White Rock's death, but as Investigate West has reported, the FBI is in charge of investigating in-custody deaths that occur under BIA's watch, according to a memorandum of understanding between the agencies. I'm sorry, do you remember who runs the FBI? Do you really think they give a shit? Which is ironic considering who runs the FBI. This isn't exactly a white person. Instead, Idaho State Police conducted an inquiry into White Rock's death. It's unclear why the FBI, which declined to comment, did not investigate, and the BIA did not respond to requests for more information from Investigate West. Really? You don't know why they declined to investigate? Are you familiar with the Trump administration? All right. Idaho State Police did not return a message Friday asking the status of the inquiry. At least somebody's, attempting. So, the lawsuit is seeking to uncover the identities of the involved officers and also seeks damages. All right. So that is the end of the 5th article. I didn't think I was going to do that one, but then I decided, yes, if I'm going to do Eswatini, I should do the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I really don't have much else to say in this video, which, oh wow, it's almost an hour. So with that, I will see you guys in the next one.